Hello everyone, and welcome to RE for term 4. We are moving away from Hinduism this term and we're moving on to Christianity. So we're looking at this big question: why do Christians call the day Jesus died Good Friday? So quite a big question. So we're going to be looking at the Easter story this term because we're obviously leading up to Easter, and looking at what happened to Jesus at the end of his life and thinking about what that meant for Christians and what could be good about him dying. So before we go any further, if you have a look at this, up here, I've got a little picture for you which kind of shows the big story of the Christian Bible, and it's all the key themes that we learn about when we go through that Bible. So the first 4 are to do with the Old Testament in the Bible, and the second 4 are the New Testament. So the New Testament covers Jesus's life and death and what happened next, basically. So it starts with incarnation, which is a big word, but it just means God coming to earth as a human, which was Jesus. And gospel is Jesus's life. So what he did while he was alive, what he said, what message he brought. And then we come on to salvation, and salvation is our theme in this unit. So we're going to be thinking about what the word salvation means, and particularly what it means to Christians. So I've circled it here as well because these pictures are quite helpful. They give us some clues about what these concepts mean when we're learning about Christianity. Sometimes it can be quite tricky to understand the meaning of different parts of what happens in the story. So salvation has got a picture of, it looks like something that you might use to rescue somebody. So I wonder if salvation has got something to do with rescue. If you look here, this is part of that really long, detailed picture, which we call the big picture of the Bible, and we have that displayed around school and in some of our classrooms. This is the part that represents salvation. So it might give you a few clues about what salvation means. Maybe you'd like to pause for a minute, just have a look and see what you can spot in here. Okay, well, I jotted down a few things that I spotted in here. There's no right or wrong answers here. These pictures are open for you to have a look at and see what you can see in them. But what I noticed was all these grey buildings down here, and then all this colour up here, and then what looks like a path linking the two of them. And as you can see, there's an arrow pointing up and an arrow pointing down. So I was wondering if salvation's got something to do with joining all this colour to all this grey. Maybe the grey could represent the earth, and maybe this could represent heaven or the kingdom of God or Jesus. And in between, on this path, it looks like a cross, doesn't it? So perhaps the cross is significant in this story as well. Okay, so we're going to be thinking about that Easter story. So the main events that Christians remember and celebrate at Easter time. So can you remember what happened to Jesus in that Easter story? There's a clue in this picture. And what's that got to do with salvation? So why did that happen to him? Well, the word salvation really means to save or protect or to rescue somebody. So we're going to be thinking about, why did Jesus' death on a cross save people? Who did it save? And what was it saving them from? So to help us refresh our memories, because we might be starting to remember some of the things that happened in that story, we're going to watch a video, a nice Lego video for you, which takes us through the whole week, the last week of Jesus' life. It starts from his arrival in the city of Jerusalem and takes us all the way through to Easter Sunday. Okay, there's quite a lot of detail in this video, and it takes you through quite a few different things that happen. But what I mainly want you to focus on is this arrival in Jerusalem, which is known as Palm Sunday, Good Friday, so the day that he was crucified, and Easter Sunday, so the day that he was risen from the dead. Okay, and it would be really helpful while you're watching it if you could imagine that you're with him. So imagine you're one of his closest friends. Do you remember he had some friends called disciples who were like his closest followers? He had a few other people with him as well, one of whom we're going to be learning about a bit later on. But just put yourself in their shoes and try to think about what they might have felt at each point in this story. Remember, these events are found in the Gospels in the Bible, so they're found in those books that are written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which all tell in their own way the story of the main events of Jesus' life. So let's have a look for the video.
In the city of Jerusalem, everyone was talking about the amazing things that Jesus had done. Jesus was a great teacher. He healed the sick and even raised the dead. When Jesus had entered the city of Jerusalem, everyone had lined the street and waved palm branches in celebration and shouted, "Hosanna to the King!" The Jewish leaders were not happy that Jesus was so popular. Some were even claiming that Jesus was the Son of God. That made the Jewish leaders mad. They needed to find a way to get rid of Jesus. Later that week, Jesus celebrated the Jewish feast of Passover with his disciples. At the meal, Jesus took bread and wine and explained that his body would be broken like the bread, and his blood would be poured out like the wine. But the disciples didn't really understand what he meant. "Is someone trying to hurt you, Jesus?" they asked. "They will have to get through us first. We're prepared to die for you." Jesus replied, "When trouble comes, all of you will leave me." Peter said, "No way! Even if all the others run away, I will never leave you." Jesus said, "Peter, before the morning, you will deny that you even know me 3 times. Peter was troubled by Jesus' words. But one of Jesus' disciples, Judas, was already making plans to betray Jesus. Judas went to the Jewish leaders. He asked them, "How much will you pay me if I lead you to where Jesus is?" They agreed to give Judas 30 pieces of silver to help them catch Jesus. Later that night, Jesus was praying in a garden called Gethsemane. As he prayed, Judas approached. With him were the Jewish leaders and some Roman soldiers. Judas greeted Jesus with a kiss. That was the sign Judas had agreed with the guards, so as they knew it was Jesus. The guards rushed forward and arrested Jesus. "You're coming with us," they said. "The chief priest wants a word with you." It was a hard night for the disciples. As Jesus was questioned by the authorities, Peter stood outside in the courtyard, keeping warm by a fire. A man recognized him. "I know you," he said. "You're one of Jesus' followers." Peter was scared, and he replied, You must be mistaken. I don't know Jesus." Then a woman said, "Yes, it is you. I've seen you with him." Peter said, "I think you have me confused with someone else." A third person said, "Your accent gives you away. You are one of his disciples." Peter said loudly, "I tell you, I don't know Jesus." Just then, the cockerel crowed. Peter remembered Jesus' words. "Peter, before the morning you will deny that you even know me 3 times." Peter ran out of the courtyard and wept. How could he let Jesus down like that? He was supposed to be Jesus' friend. How could he say that he didn't even know him? Jesus was taken to a Roman governor called Pontius Pilate. Pilate didn't think that Jesus had done anything wrong, so he tried to find a way to release Jesus. It was the governor's custom at the feast to release one prisoner. Pilate thought this was an ideal way to set Jesus free. There was a notorious criminal called Barabbas that everyone hated, so Pilate brought him out with Jesus. Pilate asked the crowd, "Which of these prisoners do you want me to set free, Jesus or Barabbas?" It was an obvious choice, But the Jewish leaders had stirred up hatred for Jesus among the people. So the people shouted, "Barabbas! Give us Barabbas!" "What shall I do with Jesus?" asked Pilate. The crowd shouted, "We want him dead! Crucify him! Crucify him!" Jesus was put to death on a cross on a hill called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. With him were two criminals, one on his left and the other on his right. One criminal turned to Jesus and said, "If you are the Son of God, save yourself and us." The other said, "Don't you fear God? We're here because we deserve to be, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus said to him, "Today you will be with me in paradise." As Jesus died, the sky turned dark for 3 hours. The ground shook, and the curtain in the temple was torn from top to bottom. A Roman soldier who watched him die said, "Surely this was the Son of God." Some of Jesus' friends took his body and placed Jesus in a tomb. A large stone was rolled across the entrance, and the tomb was sealed shut, and Roman soldiers guarded the tomb. 3 days later, the women went down to the tomb to anoint Jesus' body. But when they got to the tomb, they were surprised to find that the stone had been rolled away and the tomb was empty. They went inside, and 2 angels said to them, "Why are you looking for Jesus here? This is a place for dead people, but Jesus is alive." The women could not believe it. Could it really be true? As they raced back to tell the other disciples, there in the garden was Jesus. It really was true. Jesus had risen from the dead. "This is a day to celebrate," they said. "Jesus is alive."
Okay. So hopefully some of those events were familiar to you from that story. As I said, we're not going to be looking at all of those events today. Some of them we'll look at in different lessons. So we're mainly going to be thinking about Palm Sunday, which was the day when he arrived in Jerusalem, Good Friday, the day that he was crucified, and Easter Sunday, the day that he rose from the dead. So I just wanted to quickly show you a picture of 3 different crosses. Now, you may know already that the cross is a really important symbol, really the main symbol of Christianity. And Christians use crosses in different ways to represent different parts of that story. So could you pause for a minute and have a look at these 3 crosses and try to think, how do those 3 crosses link to those 3 events? Oh, left that uncovered for you. To those 3 events that we've just seen in the video. Okay, so you might know, or you might not know, that these crosses are made of woven palm leaves. And palm branches is what the people were waving as Jesus entered Jerusalem. Traditionally, that's what they would have done when a king or a really important person arrived in the city. So a palm cross is used to celebrate Palm Sunday, that day when he arrived in the city. And the next cross has got a red cloth on it, and you might have noticed a crown of thorns up here. I don't think it mentioned in the video, but when Jesus was crucified, a crown of thorns was put on his head, kind of to mock him and sort of degrade him. So that cross links to Good Friday, the day when he died on the cross. And then this last one has obviously got the words "He is risen," so that would link to Easter Sunday, and it's got that white cloth and the sun rising behind it, I guess, to represent that he had risen. So I just wanted to quickly show you those crosses and how they link to the different parts of the story. Now, the person that we're going to be focusing on today is actually Mary Magdalene. You might have heard of her, or you might not. She was one of Jesus's followers as well, not one of his disciples, but she was there throughout when those things were happening to him. It says in the Bible that Jesus had originally healed Mary of 7 demons, so he had healed her, made her better, and after that she had become a really close friend and follower, a really loyal follower of him. In the Bible it says that Mary stayed at the bottom, at the foot of that cross the whole time while Jesus was dying. She stayed by him. And then, as you saw in the video, when it said the women discovered his empty tomb, one of those women, we're told, was Mary Magdalene, and was one of the first people to see him resurrected in the garden. Do you remember? It looked like it was the gardener, but actually it was Jesus. So Mary was there while all those things were happening. So put yourself in the position of Mary and just pause for a minute and think about what feelings she might have had at these points in the story. So first of all, can you pause and think, what feelings might she have had on Palm Sunday when Jesus arrived in Jerusalem and she arrived with him? Okay, these are some of my ideas. I wondered if maybe she would be feeling proud. I mean, he received a huge welcome when he arrived. He was quite famous by then and had a lot of admirers and a lot of followers. So perhaps she felt pride, but also she may have felt anxious because this was a dangerous place for Jesus to be. The leaders in Jerusalem were suspicious of Jesus, and they wanted to find a way to arrest him. So she may have felt anxious about that. She may have been excited. She may have not known what the future was going to hold. But also she might have been scared for him. Perhaps she was fearing for his life. Jesus probably knew what was going to happen to him, the dangers that he was facing there. But she may not have known. She may have been worried about what was going to happen next. Okay, moving on to Good Friday. So that day when Jesus was dying on that cross, what feelings would she have been experiencing? Pause for a minute and see what you can think of. Okay, I thought of devastated. She must have been so upset that her king, the person she most looked up to and admired, was going to be dying, and she probably wouldn't have understood what was going to happen next at that point. So she may have been fearful for the future. She may have been disheartened, so as if her hopes had been dashed. So maybe she thought he was going to be a king in a more traditional sense of the word. So maybe she wasn't expecting this to happen to him. Did she think that he was actually defeated? Or was she confused about how maybe the story of Jesus' life was going to end? And finally, on that day when she discovered the empty tomb and then saw Jesus in the flesh, risen from the dead, what feelings would she have had at that point? Remember, that would have been a completely shocking thing. She would not have expected it. So pause for a minute and think about what feelings she might have had then. Okay, I thought that she would have had some confusion, obviously, at first to find that his body was gone. Maybe worry, so maybe she was worried and anxious about what had happened to his body. Perhaps she thought that his body had been stolen. But then obviously she would have been really excited, happy, elated, which just means like really, really over the moon, to see that he was actually alive. He had defeated death and come back to life. Along with some amazement, shock. Maybe she was stunned to see him. She thought he was dead, and there he was alive. So hopefully you managed to think of those feelings words as well. So using those words, your task for today is, I would like you to imagine you're Mary, and if you want to do silver tasks, can you just use these sentence stems? So use these examples and copy these down, these 3 prayers, and just fill in the gaps. So these are prayers that Mary might have said to God on each of those days. So this one is for Palm Sunday, this one for Good Friday, and this one for Easter Sunday. Okay, so remember, a prayer doesn't have to be asking God something. So a prayer can just be a conversation with God, so telling God what she's thinking and what she's feeling. So see if you can fill in the gaps using some of those feeling words that you thought of before. And also try to add in what you think would have been Mary's prayer on that day. What would she be asking God to do? Or if you'd like to, you could do gold and just write your own prayer for each of those days for Mary. I've written an example here for Palm Sunday. I'll just read it to you. It says, "Dear God, today we arrived in Jerusalem to crowds of people cheering and waving palm branches. I was bursting with pride as I followed Jesus and the disciples through the city. But deep in my heart, I'm so anxious about what might happen to Jesus here. Please keep him safe, God, and help us to trust you in your plans. Amen." So decide whether you'd like to do silver using my sentences, or gold, think of your own prayers. And I will leave you to get on with that task.